He's here in Concord, yeah.
Is that?
Yep.
Okay. The time being 6:31, I'll call this meeting of the Concord Finance Committee to order. It's kind of refreshing that it's still sunny out at this hour. We'll start, as always, with a call of the roll.
Suresh Bhatia. Peggy Briggs. Kathy Kukalo.
Here.
Eric Dahlberg.
Here.
John Garofalo. Pat Geyer.
Here.
Greg Gariello.
Here.
Don Kupka.
Here.
Lindsay Liss.
Here.
Dee Ortner.
Here.
Carlin Reed here. Paul Rodriguez.
Here.
Kazi Sadruzaman.
Here.
Shri Tupel. And Lois Wassoff.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I've got the agenda up on the screen. Tonight's meeting is more of a work session style meeting. I'm not anticipating any formal presentations or big votes. We're going to do some prep for town meeting, take a look at where we stand on our report, and, one media topic, we're going to take a look at reserves policy. But before we go any further, item number 2 on the agenda, public comment. Anybody in the room like to provide comment or ask any questions? Seeing no one, anyone online? Please raise your hand.
Sri's getting in.
Okay,
Shri's coming on.
Sri.
but no hands raised?
No hands raised. That's,
Okay,
just Dakota's here, that's it.
okay. Welcome. The moderator is going to join us at 7 when we take a look at the warrant in the event there are any questions that are appropriate for her. So we do have some time ahead of that to take care of other agenda items. We'll move forward to the liaison report, which is item number 3. I'll toggle up to that on my screen share. Does anybody have any late-breaking updates for the liaison report? Anything you weren't able to get turned around in time for the printed version?
I do.
Colin?
I had one omission from my report on the PEG Access Advisory Committee, and Don, I think you were assigned to work on that. Just want to let you know, at their last meeting, at the very last meeting, they did approve their budget, which is a key component for our enterprise hearing. So PEG Access Committee did approve their budget. They also approved the Comcast contract for the Select Board.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can we ask questions?
Sure.
What is the contract amount?
The contract amount for the Comcast?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's still quite confidential at this moment. They haven't revealed the full amount. That'll be presented to the Select Board at some point. I'm hoping before the April 24th meeting, but I'm not sure what the amount is or the provisions. I know it's a 10-year term. That's all I know about it.
A 10-year term, okay. Thank you.
Okay. I will note that this liaison report includes the recap of the chair's breakfast, which Colin covered last week in my absence. Thank you, Colin. Great recap. So this is pretty detailed liaison report. Any other late additions or questions? Okay. We'll move on to item number 4, which is correspondence. We had a number of communications to the FinCom in the packet, several emails from taxpayers. I'm in touch with the taxpayer who submitted those questions. Most of them relate to the town manager's budget. He has been in direct contact with the town manager, and I checked in with him to see if he had the opportunity to attend or watch after the fact the select board meeting of Monday, the 24th, where the town manager presented her budget in detail. I'm hopeful that she answered a lot of his questions. He indicated he hasn't had the chance to, he didn't see it live, he hasn't had the chance to watch it. So I don't think there's any action required by the FinCom at this time. I think I encouraged him to watch it, circle back if he has follow-ups that we can help him with.
Thank you for reaching out to him.
Okay. Other correspondence. Anthony, I see you included the State Department of Revenue's certification of the regional district's excess and deficiency balance. Came in at just over $1.6 million. I did check in with Julie Viola, the chair of the committee. She confirmed that this matches what they were tracking. So it's always good when the state and the district are in sync on these things. So that was a good update. Thank you for that. Anything else of note in correspondence, or does anybody have any questions about what was included in the packet? If not, I think,
I had one quick comment. About the tone and the responses is very, very well and balanced. Like especially some that are like kind of misdirected to the different groups that are responsible for the topic of conversation. I thought it was very respectful in tone and stuff like that. So.
okay.
Stuff like that.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
No other
Try to be more consistent.
questions or points on correspondence. We'll move ahead to minutes. We have one set of minutes from our previous meeting, which was on February 27th. I'll pull those up on the screen. Thank you to Colin and Dawn for getting those drafted. Any suggested amendments or revisions to the minutes?
No.
Anthony, any hands raised online from FinCom members?
No.
Thanks.
No.
Okay, then I think we can proceed to a vote of approval on the minutes.
Well, first we need a motion to
Motion to
approve
approve
as presented.
So,
as presented. Motion to approve the minutes of February 27th, 2025.
Thank you, Dee. Can I get a second?
second.
Okay, thank you, Lois. All right, and let's do a roll call vote. Suresh Bhatia, I don't think he's come in. Peggy Briggs, Kathy Kukalo,
Yes.
thank you. Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
John Garofalo, Pat Geyer,
Yes.
Greg Gariello.
Staying.
Okay. Greg abstain. Don Kupka,
Yes.
Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Dee Ortner,
Yes.
Carlin Reed, yes. Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Kazi Zadruzaman,
Yes.
Shri Tupel. Can he hear us now?
Yes.
Thank you, Shri.
was on.
Good, thank you, Shri. And Lois Wassoff,
Yes.
thank you. It passes.
Great.
Thank you for your continued excellence in drafting
And
these minutes.
timeliness.
Ken, thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay, we are way ahead of schedule. Like I said,
Nice. Nice.
the moderator is going to join us at 7. So what we can do, we're going to hold off on taking a look at the warrant until she joins us. What I think we can do is cover reserves
Yeah.
policy.
Yeah, good idea.
This is probably the meatiest item on our agenda tonight. Some background on this topic. Recall that we had an initial conversation about this at our meeting on February 27th, exactly a month ago, when the CFO presented several articles that are going to be on the warrant related to reserves. And I'm forgetting the numbers of the articles. One article is going to create new capital and debt stabilization funds and make initial transfers into those from free cash. And another is going to make a transfer from free cash into our existing general stabilization fund. That presentation prompted some discussion. Dawn took the initiative to prepare some thoughts, took a preliminary look at what other towns are doing in this area. I thought we had a good introductory discussion on it.
And Lindsay as well.
Yes, of course. Mary Hartman, the chair of the select board, was present at that meeting and in follow-up invited us to join her and the select board at their meeting on Monday, the 24th, to discuss this further. So I looped in, given the topic, I looped in Dawn and Lindsay. Lois was also in attendance. We prepared some slides just to structure the discussion and presented the select board with a very preliminary recommendation. We acknowledged explicitly that the full finance committee had not yet taken a look at this recommendation. So we framed it as preliminary with the expectation we'd take it back to the finance committee, which is what we'd like to do tonight. Dawn, would you like to add
Sure.
to that?
So, yeah, without benefit of the slide, those of you who were here in our last meeting saw that we are behind other towns in terms of our total reserves relative to, I think the metric I used last time was the levy limit. So for the select board, incorporating feedback from this meeting, I recast that as total reserves as a percentage of the year's budget and calculated that for every town on the list. And inclusive of $5 million for the middle school reserves, Concord's total reserves, and 9.8 million of free cash. Concord is at about 9% of the budget, which puts us third to last in a group of 13. Thank you, Eric. Eric has put up the slide. So these are also AAA rated towns that are near us. And the average free cash balance of those towns is 11.7%, and the average of free cash plus stabilization funds was 16.3%. Keep in mind with our I'm sorry, I misspoke. We were at 11%, not 9%. But our 5 million of that is to be used in the next couple of years, the middle school stabilization funds. And so if we were simply looking at free cash, we would be down around 7.5%. Yeah, 7.5. So when looking at other towns to see rationale, did they just develop these balances because they have no good uses for the money? And that doesn't appear to be the case. And presented to the select board something from the town of Lexington, where they laid out the rationale as follows. They said free cash should be maintained at 7% of the budget to allow for ins and outs, and that's just a healthy way to run a town. Anything above that should be allocated to a general stabilization fund up to, and the general stabilization fund target should be enough to make up a 30% shortfall, say during a recession, in state aid and in other revenue sources for the town. That these are things that are, in other words, non-property tax revenues. So have enough in a general stabilization fund to cover a 30% shortfall over a 3-year period. If we were to apply that to Concord and add in the 7% for free cash on top of that stabilization fund, our target would be 20%. Lexington also maintains capital stabilization fund, and they have their, which as do we now, have a laundry list of capital projects coming, and the goal of the capital stabilization fund is to smooth out the increase in taxes so that there is no big step required when you're launching a big project. So we recommended to the select board that we adopt a policy of 15 to 25% in stabilization funds. A general stabilization is mentioned to avoid having to make deep cuts if revenue that's out of our control comes up short after the budget is approved. And that we take our capital forecast, our capital master plan, and look at the debt, what was this, pylon chart that would result from it, and then see where that should be placed. We certainly don't have the benefit of going back a few years and voting differently on the allocation of free cash, but every year there are requests for free cash. I remember voting for, I think it was $500,000 for affordable housing several times. And while I'm not saying I would necessarily have voted differently, I wasn't thinking about the possibility of recession and the need and the possibility of the town coming up short in state aid to cities and towns, or other taxes, other tax receipts that are outside of our control. And I think it's wise to have those things, and I do look forward to working with Anthony and all of you in the select board, that I think, to take our capital master plan and figure out the fiscal impacts of it and make some recommendations about timing of things, given debt that's rolling off. Yes, Paul?
So just so I'm aware, because I'm a little ignorant on this, is with the stabilization fund, if those shortfalls happen, does that give Anthony the ability to tap the stabilization fund?
Not immediately.
Or does it need a vote?
It needs a vote.
Okay.
Town meeting vote.
So it's a town meeting vote?
Yep.
It's like once a year.
Yeah.
Well, it can be a special town meeting. If let's say that our budget's approved at town meeting, and then in September, the governor reduces aid, Chapter 78 or any other aid to Concord, this would give us the ability to ride, theoretically, to ride that out while we figure things out and not have to make rapid changes in the middle of the,
Okay, but it would require a town meeting vote.
yes.
Yeah, Lindsay prepared the slide I'm displaying here, which is very, very helpful. It lays out the definitions. When we talk about reserves, there's really two different things. It's free cash, and then it's stabilization funds. Oh, yeah. Lindsay, I've got your slide up on the screen. I hope you can see it. Do you want to just quickly
I was
walk
just going to
through?
make a correction. If you'll remember, on the bottom right where we talk about the differences on number 3, they corrected me that the law recently changed, and stabilization fund appropriations now require just a majority vote to take money out or to spend money, and a majority vote to put money in. So just a majority to establish and establish the fund and put money in, but a 2/3 majority to take money out, and that's the new law.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Is Lexington at that mark right now?
No, they're behind that. That's their,
They're what they want, their wish list?
so essentially, if they have free cash of 7%, then everything above that goes into a stabilization fund until they get to the total of 20% between the two of them, and then it can be allocated to, or they may, in a year, they may say, well, we're $1 million above our target on free cash. We'll put $500,000 into the general stabilization and $500,000 into debt stabilization, or they may put it all in debt stabilization because they know what's coming. In any case, it gives another perspective when faced with a vote on what to do with requests for money from free cash,
Right.
which we always see. And it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, there's still a 7% balance of free cash, and free cash is there for those one-off, unbudgeted purposes that are not recurring. Free cash shouldn't be used for recurring expenses.
Yeah, and typically when we went over that, even before my time on the FinCom, right, we would allocate $1 million, to go back to taxpayers.
Right.
And that was
Right.
fun. That was like, if we got over our mark, it was 10 million or something right around there,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, we would always have a
Yeah.
warrant article, $1 million to offset.
Yeah.
That's what we did with it. And
Yes.
to your point, instead of
Yes.
Saving
putting
it.
that into a fund.
So they address that specifically in Lexington and they say that it's not to be used for that purpose because it's to be held in reserve.
Right.
And one of the members of the select board raised the point that Concordians would rather hold their own money than let the town hold it for them. And I respect that and had the same view prior to my research on this, when I realized that the headroom between our taxes and the Prop 2.5 is insufficient to allow for us to make up in the shortfall, to call everyone and say, will you, we're going to raise your taxes to make up for this. No, it's not going to happen. So we can't, we don't have the ability. So having a reserve would be the way around that. Yeah.
Colin?
I'm looking at, we've been talking about stabilization funds here for a little while, and one of the warrant articles has a suggestion about withdrawing funds from the middle school stabilization account. I thought we were going to withdraw $1 million from it, but the warrant article says $500,000 about it. What's going on there?
Yeah, we picked that out. That was an error. It's $1 million.
Anthony, how do we determine how much that should be? Maybe it should be 2 million this year.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think there was a regional plan when somebody came this up, and it was before I came. So, I'm just looking over, the next 5 years, and, we roughly have around $5 million, maybe here over $5 million. So, it could be just smoothing that. This year we have the increase from the borrowing from last year.
Yep.
So, could we gone to $1.5 million? Sure. But, it's,
Well, who makes the call? Is it the town manager or?
it was my recommendation. Kerry and I were talking about it. Ultimately, we have to decide. It's gonna be $1 million or $1.5 million, so.
Okay.
Maybe the concept, when that was being set up, was we've got this period of time coming up where we're still paying for the elementary schools. So we've still got that debt, and then we've layered the middle school debt on top of it. So there was this spike in debt service. So the concept was smooth that out, because the end of, I think it's a 5-year period, the debt for the elementary schools is paid off, and it drops away. So that was the reasoning behind it. So whatever creates that smoother, it shaves off the top of that peak. I can't do that calculation in my head, but I know that was the kind of calculation that we did when we were talking about setting up the middle school stabilization fund in the first place.
Okay. Yeah,
Which was,
Kerry and I
yes,
are gonna
years
talk
ago.
about it before the public hearings and
Yeah.
see what that right number is.
So what we took as an action item after Monday's presentation, the select board was in principle in agreement with our recommendation. Again, I said I wanted to circle back with the full finance committee and make sure as a body we're aligned on this. And that we would take the action item of drafting a policy that frames this. Now, the select board is the policy-making authority and body in town, so it would be up to them to finalize it and approve it, but they're looking to us essentially for advice and for a first draft. Colin?
One other aspect, this policy that's posted doesn't take into account any of the requests for free cash from pending warrant articles. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
I think just as the age-old answer to that joke, they both, they both go on the table. I think that if there's a policy of holding 7% in free cash, it's not just so that it grows moldy there. There will be applications, there will be times when it makes sense to use it to draw free cash down, and hopefully it gets replenished the following year. But if we have in excess of 7 or 7.5%, whatever number we think is appropriate, then that goes into a reserve fund. And if there are requests for free cash, we all keep in mind where we are relative to the policy, if this becomes an adopted policy. If the town is short of its of its reserve policy, and we're voting in favor of allocating free cash for trees or for any worthy purpose, we'll have a good, healthy debate on the subject, I think.
Okay, so last follow-up on that one. We don't know what the requests are for free cash for this town meeting. And yet we're also going to be proposing a dollar amount in our to be put into the stabilization funds. At what point are we going to ask/require the sponsors of the warrant articles for this town meeting to specify how much they want for MCI Concord, for the Peabody, for 2229 Main Street, the articles that say for a sum certain, but they don't say what that sum certain is.
Yeah.
When do we ask them, tell us your numbers so that we can figure out what we're going to do with the stabilization fund warrant articles?
Right, that's the select board. They'll determine that, and that came up in our presentation with them. And one of the points, so I responded by saying, well, when these one-off things come up, sometimes we can look to see, is there something we are not going to do in order to free up funds for this higher priority? Or secondly, is there anything of surplus that we could accession that would then allow, produce some cash that could be used to fund a purpose?
Thank you, Don. I see Pat has her hand up online. Pat?
Yes, so this is more than just shuffling money around. How are we going to get to 20%? Is this a property tax raise? Are we doing it in a year, over 3 years?
No, Pat, this is not a line. This is not a line in the budget. We're talking about what happens to unspent funds at the end of a budget year.
And we do.
So the money is already there.
Yes.
Understood. Thank you.
And I skipped over this slide, Pat, and everyone. This is our existing policy on reserves.
Can I just to one more thing on what Don said, so the money is already there.
Sure.
You know, historically, we've used free cash to, until last year, to offset property tax increases. So, you know, to the extent that we wouldn't be doing that anymore, that implies, that wouldn't be used to offset property tax increases anymore.
Thank you, Lindsay.
But using the middle school stabilization fund would be offsetting our taxes, wouldn't it?
Yeah, a stabilization fund, it is. But, and actually, as I think about it, in the state's definition of free cash and its appropriate purposes, using it to reduce next year's taxes is not allowed.
Not recommended.
Not recommended. Thank you, Anthony. Yeah. Yeah.
And what I'm showing on the screen, we do have existing policy on this in town. It's quite dated, it's quite vague, and it's I would characterize it as insufficient under the circumstances, what we're considering. But we do already specify a level for free cash between 5 and 10%. That's in our existing policy. So this is not totally out of left field to want to set these parameters like this.
But is there a reason why we're following or emulating Lexington and not one of the other ones?
No reason at all. It was simply every town has their own philosophy, and that one was just one I pulled to bring to the select board.
Bill Quasi, it's worth noting that the towns on that list that have lower reserves than we do have all had Prop 2.5 overrides in the last year.
Yeah,
so,
operating overrides.
That might inform our decision about who to use as a role model, because all three of those towns have had to, have found themselves dealing with the problem in the very recent past. And on the use of free cash to offset a portion of the property tax, a lot of that predates my time on the Finance Committee, but I know I've recently looked at a summary of how our free cash position has changed over the years, and there was a time 5, 6, 7 years ago and more where free cash, we had a lot of free cash every year. It's almost as though this is I'm going to say this, it's going to be a blunt instrument. So it's almost as though too many taxes were created. There it is. The tax rate was too high, and we ended up with a lot of free cash when it was certified, and the powers that be at that point, none of whom are here now, said, okay, and gave some of it back. But there was a lot of flexibility there. We haven't been, as a town, we haven't been in that position of having those kind of extreme levels of free cash since before COVID. So we've been running, either we're more accurately calculating our taxes, or there are other issues that are keeping us from building up those kind of free cash reserves. But we don't have that kind of money to spread around.
I mean, that answers my next
Yeah.
question, which was, do we look at historic numbers? And it looks like
Yeah.
we did, yeah.
Yeah. So this policy wouldn't spend an additional dime. What it would do is help us, if capital stabilization accounts would help us to avoid spikes in property taxes when the town has a planned capital project. And general stabilization accounts would help us to avoid emergency slash of teachers and you name it in mid school year after the budget's been approved, should the funding that's out of our control not come through.
So even though we say the other one's inadequate, it does have that one clause that if it gets over 10%, we should put it to a general fund stabilization fund is the actual words right there, right? This D number 2, right? And we just saw, since I've been here, we were at like 10, and we never
did that.
We never adhered to the policy.
That's a good point.
Right, I don't know, looking to the people that may know previous to 2000, if you go back to your previous chart. Right, for 1918, back in this time frame, we let it sit in free cash probably, is my guess, right? So we need to change another thing, not just the policy.
Right.
Right? I mean, there's not a huge difference in this policy to me. I mean, pushing over there, but we need to actually have Anthony take action
Yeah.
on the policy if we're going to create one.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Comment?
Yes, Steve.
I'm right along with what Greg was just saying. I think, and you also mentioned that the policy that you were looking at before was 2017. Maybe next year would be a good time to review all of the policies that the Finance Committee has. I think it's kind of too short right now between now and the end of this fiscal year, but to review all the policies. And also, well, that's one thing. That was one comment. I'll get back to another one later.
Okay. Okay.
That's a
Anyone
good
else?
suggestion, Dee.
Well, what I'd like to, and Dee, you may want to raise your second point now, because my sense is we're going to wrap this up just because the moderator is going to be joining us to take a look at the warrant.
Oh, that's okay. Let the moderator join us.
Okay. I don't think she's joined yet.
All right.
Is she on?
Okay. So I get, one of the comments I had was, so where are we in terms of the general stabilization fund?
Our general stabilization fund is open and it has $5,000 in it.
Okay, that's where we are at this time.
Is that the amount required to open it?
Okay.
I don't know. Anthony reported that.
So a policy would then, if in writing a policy associated with that, your stabilization fund, how would you think of structuring
I
that?
think it would be a reserves policy that says that the town aims to hold X percent, which I think we should agree what that is,
Okay.
as free cash, and that funds above that should be allocated by the select board, at their recommendation, to either or both of a capital stabilization fund or a general stabilization fund.
Okay.
And if, and leave it at that, because free cash there's already the ability to move to reserve, to withdraw funds from free cash for a worthy purpose, right?
Okay. So my other one had to do with whether or not we as a town and at the state level have received any information associated with any cutbacks in funding at the federal level?
I don't believe that we have. However, on March 20th, Governor Healy put out a press release that said that the state receives over $2 billion in education funding from the federal government, that flows through to cities and towns, and that if that is reduced, the state is not in a position to make up the shortfall.
Okay. So are we aware of how much money our town has?
Yes, our town receives a little over $4 million in education aid and a little over $6 million total in state aid. And Anthony, correct me if I'm misstating anything here.
Yeah, the only thing, state aid is, in Chapter 70 is not federal. So the money that Don just mentions is not in jeopardy. I think what I had a slide up the other night, and I can try to find it, is there's two areas. It's ESSA funds for the school and IDEA grant funding, and it was approximately $680,000 that CPS gets, and another maybe $500,000 that the region gets. So I think that's some of those funds. Now, you know, the president did say that that's not going to be touched, but you know, things seem to change on a daily basis, so I'm not quite sure. But that's the federal funding right there.
Okay, so that federal funding, and the 500 is at the regional level?
Yes.
I believe it's at the region,
It is.
yeah. It was
You're right.
about 500,000, yeah.
Okay, and the 680 is
That's CPS.
Yes.
CPS. So what impact would that have, do you know,
That's-
at CPS?
From my understanding, those two grant fundings has to do a lot with special education, IEPs, and then
Serious.
disabilities,
Okay,
and
All right.
additional funds for those purposes.
Significant impact.
The
That has to
superintendent
be made up.
made a comment, and her words were, "It would be devastating." That's what she said. But her peers, as well as the state, have told her to continue on the current course and like react when you have stimulus to react. But how she said it is a loss in that funding would be devastating.
okay, and that was 680,
To CPS and $500,000 to the
Yeah,
region.
so roughly 1.1.
okay.
So it's 1.1 that's at jeopardy or at risk?
Yeah, but remember, the region would only be responsible for, what's it, 74% of that, so.
Well, I do want to point out, though, that I recall a time when there was great, I shouldn't say no, but there were great reductions in all state aid to cities and towns in Massachusetts. And in a rainy day, you know, there's really, I don't consider any of the funding that's outside of our own property taxes to be a given.
Greg?
Going back to the policy here, just probably, Anthony, can you walk me through this? Say we had $100 million. We had 15 million in free cash, so we're over our 10%. How does that 5% get into the stabilization fund? Do we have to do a town meeting the year after?
Yeah, so.
Like, how does the timing work with it? Because I know it's always changing, right?
Yeah, so once free cash certified, and we have that dollar amount at the next town meeting, and consider we only do one town meeting a year, we would then propose, what I basically did this town meeting is propose the warrant article, or two, depending on what the policy that ultimately gets developed says to do. So that's how you would put it in.
When do we certify free? Isn't that in the end of the summer or something?
It's, we're in the process of now waiting to get our response back from the Department of Revenue, but we're late, you know, we're working towards getting that certified in October when it really should be.
Okay, so that
we're-
would set us up for,
It would set us up for a better situation, so we're working on that. And while I can, Eric, to just continue on, it's great that you're talking about the stabilization funds, and that's why something that I brought these up this year, because it was alarming, and, you know, as I think Dawn pointed out too, that, you know, Moody's did flag that, you know, so that's important, you know, because we do have projects in the future, you know, you toured public safety building and the public works buildings, and those need to be replaced. So it's great, and communities have a lot of different policies out there, and one of the things that the Department of Revenue does is that they work with communities to develop best practice policies. So when I reached out to them months ago, and they said, sure, it's just there's a long list of communities that want DOR to come in. But so what DOR is going to do is that they're going to put on a workshop for employees like myself to work together to come up with these policies, which I am on the list to do that. And I think we're hopefully going to have start that training with DOR in June. So it's one of the things that we're looking at internally is to develop these policies, like Dawn said, that, you know, the last time it was 2017, and then, you know, they could be a lot better. But we certainly recognize that and hoping to bring something forward. And feedback like this is gonna be helpful. Even when we, you know, Carrie and I talked about what we would propose putting in, you know, again, feedback like this is helpful. If, you know, I'm hearing the 7%, you know, we were thinking 5% because it's a combination, right? As you folks said the other night, you got free cash and you still got the middle school stabilization. So that all counts towards what your stabilization funds are. The important thing is that we have a policy, and just what you're saying, that when it gets over a certain dollar amount, that's really where you need to start tucking money away.
I think we need to look at that chart one more time, though, and think that 1/3 of our funds, that 5 million in middle school stabilization, will be gone in the next, say, 3 years.
Yeah.
And so that would, and it's I mean, we would be doing great if we can just replenish that. But still, we'd be in the very low end toward of other towns. And I think this is the context that I always felt was missing as we were looking at what to do with free cash. I really didn't have a good basis for making a decision on whether to vote for or against something, because I didn't really understand this aspect of reserves.
So why don't we do this? And the update you just gave, Anthony, that was very helpful on the DOR training and the fact that you're going to be working on a policy refresh anyway, starting in June. That dovetails nicely with what you suggested, Dee. It also syncs up. One of our goals, recall, was to support a refresh of our financial policies. And it aligns with one of the findings of the, recall that the Collins Center did a review of our policies and procedures, and one of their findings was that our policies could use some work. So I think this is all coming together nicely. What I'll propose is, the select board asked us to take a first crack at this policy relevant to this. I will, assuming folks are on board with this, I will take the action item to put together an outline that frames what you've proposed, what my sense is folks are on board with. It doesn't bind us to that. It's just, it'll put all of this on, you know, one sheet of paper for us to react to. And we can take a look at it at our next meeting. I'll have that for the next meeting.
I think that's a really good idea. It would help me understand it, to use not just percentages, but also dollar numbers. So even if you have to use a hypothetical, say we're using a total budget of $140 million, or pick some number, and then use that calculation as an example or scenario. That would help me understand how it all flows together.
It's a good idea.
Okay.
And Anthony, does a fixed percentage, are you better off with a fixed percentage in this policy or with maybe a fairly tight range? I mean, how much flexibility would be helpful to you?
You know, communities are different. They have ranges in there, you know, and I'd probably be looking at a range because, you know, if you hold yourself to a certain number, a certain percentage, and you don't make it, you know, you give yourself a little bit of flexibility. There's always variables that come up, extra warrant article requests that, you know, that may need to be funded. So that's why I think a range gives everybody a little bit of flexibility to have a healthy
So
discussion.
maybe no less than, but not to exceed?
Yeah, I think, yes.
So we've put a parameter there, but we've given you some flexibility within there to make some judgments about what you see coming down.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right, so I will take an action item to outline a reserves policy for our next meeting, which will be April the 10th. And we'll use that to slot into this bigger picture policy refresh that Anthony is taking on and that is responsive to the select board's request, that we take a first crack at this for their review.
Great.
Is everybody on board with that? I don't think, I defer to the body. I don't think we need a vote on that. I just want to make sure we're in general in sync. Folks online?
I'm
Okay.
good.
Okay.
I'm
Great.
good. Same with me.
I'm good.
Okay. Everybody's good.
Suresh is here
Everybody's
now.
good.
Suresh is here now, too.
Okay, now I don't see, Anthony, has Carmen joined us?
Yeah.
Okay, she may have gotten wrapped up. That's okay. Next item, we wanted to take a look at big picture at the warrant. I don't think we have time to go through the warrant. It's 41 pages in detail, but just big picture, take a look at the warrant now that it's complete. If folks had any clarifying questions about it. And then more specifically, take a look at our hearing schedule and the housekeeping around the hearing schedule. Okay? So first things first, the warrant. Do folks have any clarifying questions or flags on the warrant? And I'll pull up the full warrant here. And what I can do is I can take these questions back to the moderator if she's not able to join us. Colin?
You had given us temporary assignments for the various articles, and one of the three that you've given me is Article 22 regarding the retirement board stipend. I've been doing some digging into that, and I'd appreciate it if you would ask the moderator some more questions about that particular one to see if it seems like it passes muster. I noticed that the minutes for the retirement board have not been updated for the last year, so they're missing a whole bunch of minutes. So I can't track to see what they did, and the videos are not posted on the town's YouTube webpage, so I can't verify what's been done. So I'd recommend that you flag that one in particular.
Okay, you're 2 steps ahead of me, Colin.
Sorry.
I was going to try to ease into the homework assignments.
Jump right there.
I'd given everybody, but we could certainly go right to that. Actually, before we do, other questions about the warrant?
Just, Colin, you brought up the free cash request. So the 3 articles, what numbers that I'm hearing, just to kind of put it on your radar screen, the Peabody School would be $100,000?
Right, and that's in the warrant article itself right now, but that's the only one that has a dollar amount specified.
All right, so
What's the number of that warrant article?
Peabody School.
Oh, the Peabody School, I can find
Peabody
it.
School.
Peabody. MCI Concord,
So MCI Concord, I've heard the number $250,000. Nothing concrete on that. And as far as 2229 Main Street, I think the issue was more in line with if the town was going to pursue it, needed to negotiate, it would need town council. And I think we feel like that the budget can handle that without asking for any further money.
okay, and that you're talking about our current legal budget, which is about $400,000
Yeah, correct.
under the current town budget, so.
Correct.
So the question is whether or not they need more than that if they start doing the 2229?
We don't think that they would. It's all legal at this point,
And it's
so-
also kind of how substantive are the negotiations going to be? I mean, I was on the tour.
Years
Carlin
away.
was there too. I mean, it's down the road.
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
down the road. So that's why, tying money up, for years before you use it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's much better in the bank making money.
yeah, that's interesting.
Are there no third-party requests for free cash this year?
Those are the only ones I have flagged. That's it.
Okay.
There are some that might, like there's one article that's a citizen's petition that says, please protect our building from stormwater runoff.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out, okay, if the town's supposed to protect, what is it, the museum?
Yeah,
From
it's
stormwater
Orchard
It's a
runoff.
historic building.
Can't
It's Orchard
do it
House.
unless you have some funding along, but I don't think the citizen has thought about how much it will cost to do that, but it might come out of the stormwater fund instead of general fund. That's one of those mushy areas.
Carmen's not here.
Thanks.
Because that's, in the past, we've asked, and I thought it was in the warrant process, but it certainly should be in the hearings, so that maybe it's a note to ourselves. We have asked people who are asking for money to identify funding sources. So if, in fact, there are some articles in the warrant that seem to be asking for funds, I think it's perfectly appropriate during the hearing process
The only three
to
articles.
press them on, where did you think the money was coming from?
Yeah, the article that Colin referenced is not worded in a way that it's free cash is involved.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, that's the only one, those are the only ones I know about at the moment.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Because in the past, we have dealt with warrant articles that were very specifically looking to get money from free cash.
Right.
And that's not what I'm seeing.
No, it's just those three.
Yeah, okay.
So that means we're talking about $350,000
Right.
for requests.
Right.
Okay, you could use that, Eric, for your scenario hypothetical, free cash request of that amount.
Okay. Other points or questions about the warrant? Big picture before we take a look at the schedule. Okay, we can move ahead then to the schedule itself. For many of us, this isn't our first time at the rodeo with annual town meeting, but especially for folks who are new to the committee, we have three big responsibilities leading up to town meeting. We conduct public hearings on any articles that have a spending or borrowing component. And those are the articles that are listed under our three public hearings. I'm displaying my cheat sheet on the screen share now. So we conduct public hearings on those articles. We vote to recommend or not approval of those articles at town meeting, so we make a recommendation. And then third, we provide a brief rationale for our recommendation that's included in the Finance Committee report. And what we've traditionally done is divvy them up. There's usually a couple of dozen articles that are within the Finance Committee's scope. So to share the burden of doing this, we just divvy them up. And that's what I've attempted to do here. Nobody has more than three. Some folks get off easy with two. Some folks have as many as three. Dee and Pat, because you share the schools, I just assigned the both of you to all to five, and I'll let you you horse trade those.
What are you looking for?
As we've done with past years'
Just a
reports,
brief
very
statement.
brief, 1, 2, 3 sentences. You can use last year's report as a really helpful guide in terms of the level of detail and the length.
So that's like fewer than 100 words per recommendation.
Exactly. I'll circulate this section of last year's report so you can see it. It's, I hope it's not too much of a burden.
Me too.
Now, the only thing I'll flag, and I truly did not think of this until after I put this together, folks who are assigned articles for the third public hearing, that public hearing is scheduled for Thursday, May 1st. Our report has to be 100% done by May 5th. So what that means is you'll be on the hook to turn around your narratives in just a few days. If, in looking at this, and this goes for everybody. If in looking at this, you say, I don't know, I'm going to be out of town, or there's really no way I can do it, we can make swaps. This isn't meant to be a burden for anybody. I just ask that we account for every article and you let me know, so we don't, on the morning of the 5th, we don't wake up and realize we haven't covered all of our scope.
If it's of any use, Eric, most of these enterprise funds articles are budgets that have been reviewed by other committees and gone through that mill process once already. So someone's already taken a look at the dollar amounts to make sure it's appropriate before it comes to us. In fact, that can be our first question for each one of these is, did your committee approve this budget? And the answer
Did they write a statement?
yeah. 100 words or less.
Do you have it?
That's not what the owner is. The owner is not to ask that. The owner is to write the summary for
Sure.
Right.
the
Actually.
report. That's what
Right.
the owner is, correct?
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'll circulate last year's report. Let me write that down as an action item so I don't forget.
That's too easy. Everybody's going
That's
for the
online. We can, yeah.
Yeah, but just to make sure it's front and center for everybody.
that third day.
Shri, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, a quick question on this, the last, finance committee public hearing, so you create that few lines after the meeting or after the public hearing, or how does it, this is new to me, so I'm just trying
Yeah,
to figure
Shri,
out what's the process.
The reality is that you'll write it before, and it will look exactly like last year's. And
Who's
you-
up in this bracket right here?
Yeah, but you won't actually turn it in until after the hearing to make sure that it is still accurate. And if it isn't still accurate, you will make minor editorial changes to make it accurate. It's, I feel for Dee and Pat, the school stuff always takes more. There's a few articles that are heavy lifting. A lot of the stuff are things that will end up on the consent calendar at town meeting, will not be controversial, and a very, very brief summary of how FinCom voted on it is all you need to include. Years ago, we took a little flack because our presentation of the recommendations did not include our rationale, and it was fair criticism. So that's why we make sure that we state a reason. But I think, I can't remember it, even though I was one of the people who wrote it, but when you see the actual text, some of it just says, this is a standard article that is not controversial, or this accurately reflects decisions made by the committee with responsibility for this area. They're very short. So,
But the committee has to vote for it then?
yeah, well, on each of these articles, after
Right.
we hear the presentations at the hearings, we'll take a vote. And we'll
Okay.
either vote affirmative action, meaning, yep, we think town meeting should pass the article, no action, which means we think town meeting should not pass the article, or we can defer action to town meeting. And we do that sometimes where something, even at the point of our hearing, is in flux. We don't have the information. The entity presenting it doesn't have the specific numbers. There's a change being negotiated. So sometimes we actually don't take a position in the report because we're going to take a position at town meeting based on additional information. But for most of these things, we will, it's not that this is pro forma. These meetings are very serious, and we actually are listening and asking the questions and probing, because the hearings are a chance to get into some depth on this that you can't get into in town meeting. But the output is not as burdensome as you might think.
Okay.
Thank you, Lois. That was very helpful. And you're exactly right. So using the first public hearing as an example, Shri, and everybody, so
Yeah.
our first public hearing will be on Thursday, April 10th at 7 p.m. All of these, just to be honest, these are going to probably be long nights. I can see these going 3, maybe 4 hours. We will hear from article sponsors, and then we'll have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions as members of the Finance Committee, but then really, the point of it, it's a public hearing. We're going to open it up for members of the public to ask their own questions. We will, of course, listen to their questions and their comments and the responses, and then either later that night or at the following public hearing, depending upon how late it is, depending upon if there are any follow-ups, if we need additional information before we're able to vote, we'll take a vote to recommend or not, as Lois just laid out.
And then the report would be within a week, before the next week? Just a small report on that?
When's the
article?
deadline for the report?
The deadline for the report, the drop dead date, the report has to be 100% done,
Yeah.
is May 5th. We, of course, want to be done ahead of that. We don't want to have to pull an all-nighter to get this thing done. For folks who own articles that are going to come up early in the process, like night 1 and night 2, the 10th and the 15th, you're going to have a little bit more time. My point earlier was, and again, I didn't think of this until after, so if you want to do some horse trading, it's certainly okay. For folks who have articles coming up at the last night, May the 1st, you've got a quick turnaround, because it's got to be done by May the 5th.
When you say,
High
but
five.
just to be clear though, we have to be in, we have to hand in the camera-ready report on May
On the
5th.
5th?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
then you
right.
have to have
So-
it before then.
So, yeah, I was going to suggest that we say April 22nd is the deadline for the first 2 groups. And that gives us 1 week following the second hearing. And then May the 2nd for the third hearing,
Yeah,
because
that one
it's,
should be the next day, because
Yeah.
everything has to be, Don and Carlin will have the joyous task of doing the overall edit that creates the consistency.
right.
So they need some time to work with this.
Okay. Those are good suggestions, Dawn. So folks who are covering articles at public hearings 1 and 2, that's on the 10th and the 15th respectively, we'd ask that you have your narratives completed by April 22nd.
Okay.
And folks who are at night 3, covering articles at night 3, May the 1st, yours will be done the very next day, May
Eric,
2nd.
can you highlight the third night?
What's that?
Can you show on the screen the third night?
Sure.
And it is helpful that the third night is mostly the enterprise funds. And the last 2 items, unpaid bills and debt rescission, often don't even get moved. And do we think they are going to be moved this year, Anthony? We don't know yet.
So far, no.
Yeah, so it's really, it's the shortest night, and in terms of this, this is not to say it's not an important hearing, and that we won't ask the questions and get the information and give the public a chance to ask questions. We will. But in terms of reporting the results, it's a little more straightforward.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I hope it goes without saying, you're not on your own with this. If you get stuck, if you want help, I'm happy to help.
happy to
Lois,
help.
I don't want
Me
to put you on the hook. Lois, happy to help Dawn. So don't feel like you're on your own. Pat?
So let me make sure I understand. For example, D and I have the amenities building. That's a controversial thing right now.
Yep.
Are we going to take a vote as a group on that warrant, and D and I will report that vote? Is that what we're proposing here?
It's, yes, every single article, including the amenities building, after the hearing, either immediately after or at our next meeting, the Finance Committee will vote on whether it recommends that town meeting take affirmative action and approve the article, take no action and reject the article, or whether we think this is something we need to decide at town meeting, and we would vote to defer to town meeting. And what you and Dee would write up is our vote, and then our rationale for that vote.
So I think we better decide what date we're going to be voting on, because Pat, if I'm correct, you make sure I'm speaking correctly. That session that we're going to have is April 17th.
Yeah, April
Okay,
15th.
so April 17th was on the chart that I saw.
I thought it's
April
15.
15.
15.
Or April 15th.
15.
April
It
15th.
looks like a long
all right.
evening.
All right,
So
so.
what I'm
anyway, when are-
proposing is,
I know, but when are we having a meeting after that, so we know what it is we're writing?
Yeah, let me skip ahead to the schedule, if that, because it puts it all on one page that I hope is helpful.
I think I was in
You
denial
want the
of
draft
that.
agendas too that we,
Oh, yeah. And Anthony actually already took the initiative to prepare the agendas for those meetings, so,
I can pull one up if you want.
okay. What we have in mind, again, is we're going to have a total of 3 public hearings. The first on April 10th, the second on April 15th, and the third on May the 1st. We're also going to have not a public hearing, a regular Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, April 24th,
Okay.
okay?
You're going to have a fine, at which time you're going to be making the recommendations and voting on the articles that were presented at the first 2 sessions.
Not,
And to the extent they weren't voted on already.
If they
Because
were
for
not voted
some
on-
of what will happen, you remember this, Dee, what often happens is after the public meeting closes,
Yeah.
and we go
sit
through
there
the
and
articles,
say,
we sit there
okay,
and
Okay.
we can usually, on some of the
Knock off some of them.
non-controversial articles in particular, we can usually go quickly to a number of votes.
Okay.
Where we kind of clear them off the agenda, so those
Yeah,
you'll
yeah,
know
got
about.
it. Okay.
So the April 24th one is an opportunity to clean up whatever hasn't been decided on before.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the way the schedule works this week, we have this last hearing, which is going to come after our meeting, so we're going to have to deal with all that on May 1st. But the good news is that it's the enterprise funds.
Yeah, yeah,
And
got
they
it.
are,
Yeah,
they're important, they're very important, but they're straightforward in terms of our role.
right.
yeah, and the big picture schedule is set by I'm not blaming the select board, but as a point of information, the big picture schedule, the dates for the public hearings is set by the select board. So they laid all this out. Lindsay, I saw you had your hand up.
Right, I did put it down because there might not be any flexibility around it, but the FYI, the 424 meeting is during April school vacation. So there might be some, I mean, I might not be able to attend, I don't know if others might have the same issue.
Okay.
And what's the purpose of the 24th meeting if we vote after the earlier meeting?
That,
Well, we could make it a priority to vote after that meeting, so that we won't have to have
See
it.
how it goes.
I had
Hold
it.
The date.
I had it in mind as essentially holding time if we aren't able to make as much progress as we planned on the votes. I also wanted to hold that for purposes of getting close to finalizing the report in the event we need time as a committee to go through the final draft.
The April 24th meeting?
April 24th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So for those of us who can attend, but I think that's a great point, Lindsay, and in the past, we've sometimes been exhausted after the hearings, and we've taken the easy votes and deferred the hard ones, wanting to have more discussion among ourselves, knowing that we may not have a quorum because of school break. We may change that policy this year and try to take votes the same night regardless.
Yeah. And we could also consider moving the date.
You know, I don't think we have such difficult items this year as we have had in the past. So we may, in the past, there've been a couple of things that we wanted to continue debating. I don't know. I think we're going to be okay this year, hopefully.
Okay. One other thing I'll flag, on the schedule, you see a highlighted hearing 1 and hearing 2.
You
The-
showing?
What's that? Oh, yeah. Let me share again.
April 10 and April 24?
And this is just an FYI. There's no, this doesn't really impact things for us. We'd originally planned, and the tradition is, we cover the budget articles in our first hearing. So the town and school budget articles, we cover those first with the first hearing. And that was the plan this year. There was a scheduling issue, I think at the schools. And the resolution was we flipped the dates. So the budget articles which you traditionally hear first and which traditionally take the most amount of time, we're going to cover those the second night on April 15th. Okay, and the select board approved that swap on Monday, because again, they set this schedule. So just a point of information, it really doesn't impact us in any material way. What it does do, it's going to make, the 15th is probably going to be a very late night.
Very
Yeah.
late night.
Well, it's tax day, so it's completely appropriate.
Don't remind me.
Ouch.
Get an extension.
Just put an extension in.
So this is, Eric, this is Kathy.
Yes,
Yeah. So I see the schedule of assignments for this upcoming warrant articles. Have you circulated the prior year's document?
That's exactly, in terms of the recommendations chart that was in the report, Kathy? Is that what you're asking about? Because that's exactly what Eric said he was going to circulate after this meeting, last year.
Well, I see the assignments here for this upcoming I'm looking for the document from the prior year.
are you looking for the assignments, or are you looking for the actual
No, I'm looking for
The
the
write-ups.
warrant articles from last year.
I will do that. I took that action item, Kathy. If you can't wait to get your hands on it, it's the FinCom
Okay,
report
no,
from last year.
no, if you're gonna send it out, great. I just didn't know if I missed it, because I've been traveling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Eric, there are two versions that you should think about. One is last year's and one is the year before, because the formats are slightly different on how the recommendations were made. So I don't know how you want to deal with that. Last year's was shorter than 2004 was shorter than
That's a good
2003.
point. That's a good point. We
So-
did go into a little more detail on some of the articles in the prior year.
I think we definitely want to have a very short version because we want to have something brief to include in the town meeting handout.
Yeah. And it can be short, it just has to have the recommendation itself and a very succinct summary of the rationale behind it. And in past years, sometimes we've had articles that were extremely controversial. The
Right.
year that well, remember, 2 years in a row, we went into town meeting not having reached consensus with the schools on
Right.
their budgets.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was very different. This year, we all were able to work together and accomplish that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good, Kathy, that's a good flag, and Colin, I think that's a good suggestion. I will circulate last year's report and the year prior, just so you can see the different ways we've done it. And I hope.
Do you have a preference?
I think I agree with Dawn. I think last year's, on this point, I prefer last year's report just because it was
Yeah.
shorter and sweeter.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, thank you.
Okay? But again, I want to just reassure folks, this isn't, don't stress about this. If you need help, you're not alone. It's a couple of sentences on each article. We'll get there.
I just read last year's for the school committee. It says the finance committee recommends affirmative action on this article with no.
There you go.
With no.
One sentence.
That's probably a little too brief, but
I think we took that vote at the meeting,
It
didn't we?
actually, it says it tells you exactly the outcome,
When
right?
affirmative action
But
is,
it doesn't
it's a
say
little bit different
why.
when you support it, right? It's all in the article.
But what are you going to say? They
Affirmative
came-
action because they met the FinCom guidelines. That's what I would say for that particular one. What I'm concerned about is the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. Yes, it's an enterprise fund, but their presentation will occur after they will have set the rates. So I'm feeling like I should incorporate a little bit about the rates for the Stormwater Fund inside the budget request, which is what we're actually going to be voting on. If
And-
that's too much, I won't.
Well, it's all going to be subject to an editing process. It's mostly you and Don. If, I'm getting on an airplane the night of May 4th.
You've already ditched this one.
No,
That's fine.
actually, this was scheduled before. I'm available to work with you over the
That's
weekend
fine.
remotely.
That's great.
But write it as you think it should be, and then you guys will make a decision.
Carlin, given that this is a new enterprise fund for the town, it certainly would merit its own paragraph within the report, and we can create that.
And you know, something that we've done in past years, which wasn't done in last year's report when it was cut way back, but something like this might merit it. We used to have a deep dive section where we talked about some of the big budget items. And it had gotten a little routinized. We would always do a deep dive into the school budgets. Usually there was something controversial about them anyway, but just because they were such a big number. But you could have in the chart that has the recommendations, you could have a reference to a more detailed discussion, and then have a section for the 3 articles that require a longer conversation.
Right.
And, have another page that has
Right. We can
3
certainly do
long
that.
paragraphs on
Yep,
it that go into the kind of depth.
Yep.
Because your point's well taken.
I think-
It's a brand-new event.
The borrowing article for the roads is one that will,
Absolutely, that's one that,
Another one that I'm doing. Thank you very much.
it's
I
a
got a quick
demonstration of the faith.
I've only been to one
that all
town
of a sudden-
meeting, and just because, it is what it is. And it was last year, and some of the hearings prior to that, dealing with the schools, kind of set a tone that is different this year, so.
Very different.
I think it'd behoove everybody if, in some of the recommendations or some of that we call that compromise exists, so that people don't have that reference point in their head that we're butting heads because that was what they saw last year. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but.
well, I think you're thinking of articles that we recommended against. So let's see what happens this year. If
Okay.
we recommend against, we may butt heads, but that's
100%,
democracy.
But I'm
Yeah.
just saying that, like, if the public at town meeting has a idea of a relationship that is slightly different, it might be worthwhile to spend a sentence to speak to that. I don't know.
And I think the question is whether that belongs in this recommendations chart, which literally, is a table.
Good point.
Or, I know Don is working on some introductory materials. That's a place to make that point right up front.
Or,
Absolutely.
Eric,
Maybe
even in
good.
the chair's letter.
In the chair's letter, that's an excellent
Yeah,
place.
that's
Yeah.
Because that's basically, people read the chair's letter, and then they flip to a couple of things that might interest them. Very few people read the cover to cover.
Okay.
But they will this year.
It's just
It's gonna be so well written.
it's just an observation.
It's a good observation.
Who's
Yeah.
doing the picture cover? That was always a cool thing a while back. We had, who's doing the cover? Let's not just have the picture of the townhouse again. That's
Well,
boring.
we're not gonna be a separate
It hasn't been
document
the townhouse
this year.
all the
Are we
time,
gonna be
has it?
embedded in something else?
No, well, we're both. It just occurs to me, Carlin, that's a great question. We have the opportunity, because of the deadline, to take a photograph from the April 19th, 250th celebration.
Oh,
You're right, it was a townhouse. Why should I question you?
Yeah, that would be good. I like that. Okay.
One year, it was one of the members, who was the member that's in the drum and rifle band? Like, when we first joined, he was like, anyway, it was one of the members in his colonial gear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was John Hickling.
Philip?
Oh, no, it was Phil Swain.
Yes.
That's what it was, yeah.
oh.
We could do like a FinCom.
Oh, geez.
I think we should just have a FinCom. Here you are, on the
All right,
stand,
get us out of this hole, get us out.
No.
in front of a big balloon that
Maybe
says
the bridge will
250.
share with us some of Dakota's pictures, and we can pick one of the ones where we're all looking pained, tired.
Right,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
or holding up
fine.
dollar
Photographs.
signs.
Got it.
Okay, I will, just to wrap this up, I will circulate both last year's report and the report from the year prior, and I will flag the recommendation section just so everybody has examples. I'd ask everybody to review your tentative assignments based on the document in your packet. If you have concerns, if you have scheduling complications, if you want to do some trading, please let me know and we can work it out. We are going to set the expectation, though, Dawn, I think it's a good one. If you're covering articles at public hearings 1 and 2, that's April the 10th and April the 15th, your narrative should be complete by April the 22nd. And if you're on an article on night 3, which is May the 1st, you'll turn yours around in one day by May the 2nd.
You know, I would like to just emphasize some of the comments that were made earlier about voting on the night that we hold the hearing. And I would appreciate it if we could do that as much as possible. There might be one article that we just can't decide on that night, but I think it would be in everybody's best interest if we could.
I agree, Dee. I think that's a noble goal. What I will say, though, is if folks have questions about an article and we're not able to get satisfactory responses that night, I don't think we should, and I don't think you're suggesting this, but I don't think we should just in the interest of going quickly, just
I
vote
agree.
with insufficient information.
But
So
the questions that we'd have would be ones that we'd be posing to the people who are presenting that night anyway, right?
that's true.
For the most part.
That's true. Okay.
So they should be answered.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's public hearing prep. The next item on our agenda is the report, the Finance Committee report. And what I did was, thanks to everybody who submitted outlines or drafts of their sections, I compiled those into one big draft/outline, which is included in packets. And it's still early in the process. It does contain some significant gaps. We're going to be working to close those down over the next month. Pull that up. Okay. The chair's letter, that's me. I've got a very high-level outline. This is going to be contingent on the budget articles and our recommendations. I've got some themes in mind, but I consider this a big TBD, and that's on me for now. The executive summary / introduction, Dawn, I know you're working on that.
Right, yep.
Finance Committee responsibilities, Pat. Pat, thank you for drafting this section. It looks good. I know you've got at least one placeholder in there.
Couple in the next one too.
Yep. Budgeting approach, also Pat. Some
Nice.
placeholders. Trends and challenges. This, again, is me, very high-level outline here. This is still TBD, depending upon where we land on our recommendations and the tax projections and everything else.
Eric, can we stop there? How are you going to express this concept of we seem challenged as a community to say no? I mean, this might be the first time we've redone that in a long time. How are we going to express that? Or at least how do you envision us expressing that?
I don't think I've gotten that far yet, Colin, to be honest. That's a theme I had in mind.
Okay.
It could be that it doesn't make the final cut.
Well, I rather like it. I'm just
Yeah, I do too. I like
hoping
it.
you can develop that in some direction, because it is a message that, it's not just us saying it, we're hearing it in a lot of different locations as well.
Yeah, I'll give it some thought.
Yeah.
And I welcome your input on it, too.
I have an idea for that, I don't know how hard it is to get this data, but if you had kind of a reference of where FinCom recommended budget levels and then after town meeting what it actually was, I think the trend line will be above for over a number of years, highlighting that at town meeting, the community chooses to increase certain levels at certain things, which, makes planning hard. I don't know if that's a good metric or not, but it's just an idea.
I don't know if the actuals are available to provide that data analysis.
Okay.
And I wonder if it doesn't emphasize some past tensions that we've worked
Okay,
through.
then, cool.
What I like about this as a theme is, I think this can be framed in a way that acknowledges that there are a lot of very worthy goals that people have. I mean, you can presume good intentions on the part of people who are coming forward and arguing for affordable housing, open space, protecting the environment, high standards for education for our kids. All of those are worthy.
Yeah.
And there is a competition over limited resources. And we need to make hard choices about allocation, and that's what we've had a problem doing. As a town, we want to say yes to all of these good things. But we're reaching a point where we have to start making some difficult choices. So I think
That's an interesting theme, Lois, because in the past, Paul, it hasn't really been presented as a choice among worthy options.
Yeah.
Everything that's worthy gets funded.
Okay.
So that becomes now,
Yeah.
maybe, that era may be, now it may be more a matter of allocating scarce resources rather than,
And we can emphasize that by getting back to a theme that you keep returning to and you're right to, which is we're getting close to that levy limit.
right.
And, it's not,
Right.
2.5% is 2.5%, and it's been going up every year, and our taxes have been going up every year, and our property values have been going up every year.
Right.
That's, we're gonna hit that ceiling and have to make some hard choices.
Right. And just to build on that point further, it makes sense that we would be in an era of higher inflation because the levy limit doesn't rise with inflation per se.
Yeah.
So when inflation was low, it was easier. Right now, it's just harder.
So it could be more conceptual than anything else. It could be just a discussion.
Yeah.
Associated with hard times are here and gonna be harder, so we need to have that perspective when making choices.
The we in that has to be the town.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Not the finance.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
That's a good
like
point, Greg.
the royal we
Yeah,
of the
exactly.
town meeting has to kind of, the goal would be to internalize that and kind of have that lens when making choices.
And another goal would be to set the perspective for next year as well.
Yeah.
Set the expectation level.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good point.
And I think what Don said is a good way to frame this, that when there's in a higher inflationary environment, it becomes more difficult to avoid kind of a Prop 2.5 override. And so that's kind of the lens with which to take the, the recommendation of not, just automatically saying yes to everything.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are we saying no to?
We haven't had those
We got
votes
there
yet.
We said, we
It's
also,
coming.
well, looking back over the last year, we sort of said no to a lot of budget requests.
The town
Dee.
had to cut $600,000 out
Yeah.
of its budget. The schools had to cut
Yeah.
about 300 and
So
something.
We said no
That's
to,
part of your intro.
I mean, the
Yeah.
activities building was a topic of discussion last year.
Right.
And it's on a topic of discussion this year, so we must have said no to it, right?
well,
Right.
we said no to it last year. Well,
Well-
they withdrew it. Basically,
Yeah.
we and the select board and everybody else said it isn't cooked yet.
Okay.
Now they're back, and we'll see what we come up with as a recommendation this year, once we see the presentation and go through the hearing.
Yep. Okay. So then we get into the numbers. We have a section on forecasted revenue and expenses. Anthony, I know you're working on that.
And Anthony, I'll work with you for the budget highlight section. I see that as a kind of a joint project with us, that when you do the first two, the numbers, then I'll work on the narrative and be guided by you about what the narrative should include, but I'll do the actual writing of the narrative.
Thank you.
And likewise, the proposed budget appropriation, and then Lois's highlights. And then Lindsay, we have the section on the 5-year tax projection and FinCom guidelines. I know That'll come a little bit later. That'll come towards the end of April, but you're on top of that. And then we get into our recommendations, which we talked about in our previous agenda item. And again, this aligns with those tentative assignments from my other document. So what I'd ask is that folks continue to work on their sections. Realistically, we've got about a month left before this is due, so we do have a lot of work to do. What we could do, and Dawn, we haven't talked about this, so I don't want to get ahead of what you have in mind here. I know you're kind of running the show on this. It may be helpful to, I don't think we need to post formal FinCom meetings, but we may want to have work session style meetings between now and now and our due date, just so we can continue to make progress.
Yeah, especially, that's a great suggestion, Eric. I was thinking too that I could create a shared document in which people can comment. I see Carlin's
Do that.
saying no.
Yeah, I'm having the
You're standing
same,
on the back of my neck.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm having the same gut reaction to that.
Okay, all right.
Inefficient.
Well, I think especially if there is anyone who has any question or feels challenged along the way, we could have a session to
Contact you.
between meetings. Yeah, contact me and we could
And I'm
have a
available
session.
to help too, as you
Yeah,
need it as well.
Yeah, okay.
What I would ask is that folks come to now, we're going to be focused on the public hearing and the warrant articles. We're not going to want to spend time on this, but submit your next version of your section or sections ahead of our first public hearing. So I'd ask you to submit them by April the 8th. Okay, and this obviously does not include the article recommendations, because we wouldn't have even had the hearings by that point.
So I had a May 8th meeting in my calendar, but we're not doing that one?
No,
No.
because we have to have the recommendation in by May 5, so we moved that up. So we
Okay,
did
that's
it May
great.
8 at the last meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have remembered that. Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, there is one still.
There's one on May 5th, right?
Yeah.
That's the one you're talking about?
Is there a meeting on
May
May
8th,
5th?
you said, right?
It was
No, the May-
the original
No, that's just the
Okay.
date for the report.
That may have been,
necessary?
Changed it.
I have FinCom
I have it on May
meeting
5.
on the 5th,
That's what I have too.
and then I also have a finance public hearing on the 1st of May.
That's what I have.
Right.
yep, the first is definite.
Necessary?
The first is definite. We did, there was several iterations of the schedule, and we may have held time that's no longer in play. But the schedule that's in your packet is the source of truth. It's
So there is one on the calendar for the 8th, still from Anthony,
Right.
that I have.
That's the one that I've been looking at.
yeah, I would cancel that. Cancel that.
Tell the truth.
We do have time we should have time on the 22nd of May, and the purpose of that is like a final gathering ahead of town meeting.
Yeah.
By then, the report will be done, our recommendations will certainly be done. That's really just a prep.
Okay.
Okay, so Eric, so I know it's not on your green calendar here, but we're actually meeting on Monday, May 5 at 6:30 PM.
No, we are not.
So we're not meeting there. We just have, that's what
We are not. We are not meeting on May 5th
Oh,
or
we're
May
not.
8th.
Okay.
so we just have May 1
May 1.
and May
22.
22.
Right,
Two meetings. All right.
right.
Got rid of that meeting. I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay, and that's a good segue to our last agenda item, which is schedule and goals. Now, we already took a look at the schedule. I'll just quickly display it on the screen here again. Every time I update this, it's like a trip down memory lane. It's amazing how much progress we've made this year. We're currently in March. We're about to close out the month of March. April's our big month for hearings, wrap things up officially in May, and then our work for the year wraps up with town meeting on June 2nd.
before the meeting ends, can I say something?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Especially for those who are newer to Concord, I just wanted to mention that we're part of a very long tradition here, very, very long-standing tradition, and it's wonderful that we have this tradition and we can all contribute to the town. And each year, the town honors one citizen who has given a lot to the town often over their lifetime. And this year, it's a gentleman named Sandy Smith, who I know, and who has served the town in many capacities, including finance committee, and continues to advise the town on municipal debt issuance. And Sandy is a fourth-generation Concordian, and you couldn't be a nicer person and more knowledgeable. And just want you all to know that we're all in his tradition. We're all following in those footsteps, and it's a wonderful thing to do. And if you have the opportunity, go to see him, introduce him yourselves, and thank him for what he's done for the town.
And Donna, I think the honored citizen ceremony is Sunday, March 30th at 2 o'clock here at the townhouse.
Thank you,
I think
Carla.
that's what it is.
Okay, thank you for that, Don. Before we adjourn, I did want to just quickly check in on our goals. Recall, we set some goals for ourselves at the start of the year. We last took a look at these in December, so I think it's appropriate to take another look. It's been a quarter. The first category was operations, and that was really to hit our milestones for the year, and we're on track to do that. We're not done yet, but we're on track. Capital, we set goals of developing a unified long-term capital plan, working with the town and the schools. We did that. And to treat capital similarly across budget units. We accomplished that one as well. On revenue, we set a goal of working with key stakeholders, including the Select Board, the Economic Vitality Committee, the 2229 Task Force, the MCI Task Force, and others to identify and prioritize opportunities for revenue generation. I think we're part of the way there on that. Dawn and I had the opportunity to participate in a site visit in Littleton earlier this week. Littleton recently went online with a large commercial development called The Point, and we set up time with some officials in Littleton just to understand their experience, any lessons learned they may have for us. We did that previously in the town of Maynard, and we're working on some others as well. So keeping this notion of generating revenue outside of the residential property tax on the collective agenda. Financial policies, we talked about this earlier.
Just before you move from revenue, it isn't producing revenue yet, but we also participated in the pilot.
Yes.
Development of the pilot policy, which was adopted by the Select Board, which will over time, hopefully, begin to generate some new revenue.
Good point.
New untapped sources.
Thank you, Lois. I know you did a lot of work on that, and Anthony, I know you continue to work on that. Financial policies, we just talked about this. Support staff initiative to update and document policies. Anthony's going to be undertaking a refresh of our financial policies in collaboration with the State Department of Revenue. And we're going to be taking a first crack at an update specific to reserves policy. Liaisons. I appreciate everybody's attention to their liaison assignments. I get a lot out of the reports. I really appreciate the updates that folks send over. So great job there. Communications. We continue to focus on communications. I think our success there is, we should share our success there, share our credit there for the fact that the bridge is now up and running in town. It's been a great resource for the town. Collaborating with Carlisle. We worked with Carlisle for the first time to come up with a joint guideline for the region.
I hope that continues
Yeah, that was a good.
in years to come.
Yeah.
In terms
Definitely.
of having those meetings with Carlisle.
Thank you, Dee. We do, I have been in touch with James Cataccio, who's the chair over in Carlisle. They do plan tentatively to at least attend a public hearing. We had earlier in the year talked about a joint public hearing for the region's budget and for the amenities building article. I don't know that we're going to be able to make that happen, but at a minimum, they're going to attend. So we do want to continue that collaboration. We also set a goal of making our 5-year tax projection and annual report more interactive to give taxpayers the ability to adjust or estimate impacts. It may be, I think interactive is sort of relative. It may be tough to get there just given our timeline, but I know you're working on some highlights and some features. that'll certainly get us
Yeah,
part of the way
and I'm
there.
thinking they're not actually interactive, but given that you were just at Disney and you had rides and things, maybe there's something we could do about a budget ride, I don't know. We'll work on that one.
I've always wanted to see an interactive one at town meeting, like, yes, we just voted for this, you know,
Yeah.
the thermometer goes, whoop,
Right, right,
just
right,
voted
right,
for
right.
this, whoop, you know?
Right,
Nobody
right,
would
right.
want to go last.
Well, then I would get a sense of like, oh, man, that needle's high, you gotta say no,
Yep.
you know?
This year, we're gonna have clickers.
To make the blood pressure rest.
No, not blood, they're just the voting clickers, but there will be, I don't know, maybe we can somehow tie
On the
them into
computer,
your
I'll
little
just do
magic
that.
thermometer, we'll see.
Eric, in hindsight, I kind of wish we had had one more goal, or at least added to one of these. And it would probably be with the communications and communicating with Minuteman Votech High School, because we don't have much connection with them. They come once or twice a year, and that's it. We have a representative from Concord who's going to be retiring at the end of June, and I'm concerned about losing that connection. I was hoping that maybe next year we could somehow enhance that connection somehow, some way like that. And I'm hoping that we have someone who knows something about finance and how our committee runs actually be part of that process. So.
Thank you. Well, Paul, you've been a great liaison. I know that was your assignment this
Yeah, I
year.
mean,
I've always
been
appreciated
okay.
your
I've been
updates.
okay liaison. I do pull information from their discussion and try to include it, but it's not always in line with like the timing associated with our meetings. Isn't always the best time to get that information. So, and you know, I'm new at this, so I'm learning as I go. So I could probably be a little bit better when it comes to providing some of that information to get a better insight, but I'm trying.
No, you've done a great job, Paul. Your point is well taken, Colin, but you've done a great job. I think you're referring to just the fact that our
We're
delegate or
losing our
representative-
representative,
Yeah,
someone who knows us very well, and I'm concerned about who's going to be replacing Steve Ledoux, basically.
Well, I mean, I get all my information from Steve and the discussions that we have, so your
Yeah.
point is very well taken,
Yeah.
that, you know, without that connection and some of the, like, the information that he passes on to me, it would be a lot harder to understand everything that's going on. So, that's a great point.
thank you. Lindsay, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Carlin and Paul just said, because we really don't have we don't have any control of Minuteman or any real sway over what what our increase is going to be. And I think so really the soft influence of having strong relationships with Minuteman and having a strong liaison is the only way to have any kind of say or influence or voice at the table with Minuteman. So I completely agree with them.
Thank you. Okay. So that's our goals check-in. We'll certainly do this one more time before we wrap up for the year. But I think we can be proud of all the progress we've made. I've had the opportunity to attend or listen in to several of the candidate forums, and I'm staying miles away from the politics of it, but a number of the candidates have made reference to the Finance Committee as a resource in town and as a stakeholder in town, and in a very positive light, which I think reflects really well on this group, on this team.
It also reflects well on you, so thank you for
Yeah,
leading that effort
Thank you.
to
Yeah.
calm the tensions
For
there.
sure.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. I think you did a great job in terms
Thank
of
you.
keeping us on track, and communication was, I think, your forte. We appreciate that.
Thank you. It's team effort. Okay, if nothing further, I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Do I hear a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
8:16.